You know, a good example of what I'm talking about. Actually, this is even what brought it up is Jeffrey Sachs. I've seen so many people sharing Jeffrey Sachs clips, like he's some great advocate for justice. Well, you'd have to be born yesterday to think that Jeffrey Sachs an advocate for justice. He has a long history. He didn't just spring into existence when Russia invaded Ukraine or after October 7th, 2023. Jeffrey Sachs is no friend of the global South. He's not an anti-imperialist. He's not a humanitarian savior. Never was. Sachs is and always has been a technocratic servant of imperial domination, an enabler of elite capture, a functionary of global financialized capital. He always has been. He's a chameleon of narrative who adapts only as the aesthetic of control evolves. You know, Sachs' current image as a champion of peace and multipolarity is not a rupture from his past. It's the logical evolution of a figure strategically positioned to maintain systemic control over sovereign nations under new but less militaristic costumes. He's a mouthpiece for the national OCGFC. I mean, let me give you some history here, because you may not know. Sachs rose to fame as a young economist from Harvard by designing and promoting what's referred to as shock therapy for developing countries. The rapid liberalization of markets, the removal of subsidies, mass privatization and deregulation, neoliberalism. These are not humanitarian reforms. This is textbook neoliberal interventions designed to break the back of sovereign state economies and to pave the way for foreign capital takeover, for foreign investors. Let's be clear. In 1985, Sachs' Plan Bolivia helped to crash inflation in Bolivia, but it devastated the working class in that country. He destroyed public services, and he opened the door to foreign exploitation. This was an experiment in neoliberal social engineering. And then in Poland, in like 1989, 1990, Sachs oversaw a similar restructuring campaign, causing mass unemployment, vanishing pensions, foreign corporate penetration, all under the guise of economic freedom. Then in Russia, after the collapse of the Soviet Union in like 1991, Sachs helped to create the conditions in Russia for the rise of the oligarchy class and the largest transfer of public wealth into private hands in modern history in Russia. In each case, Jeffrey Sachs acted as an instrument of Western financial colonization, enforcing what was then called the Washington Consensus, with outcomes that entrenched poverty, entrenched and worsened inequality, and destroyed state capacity. This is not a man who ever stood with the oppressed. He stood with capital, and he still does. As the narrative around global control began to shift from brute force neoliberalism to, ESG rhetoric, green capitalism, and so on, technocratic internationalism, Sachs shifted right along with it. He's not a comrade, he's a chameleon. He entered the United Nations system. He became the director of the Millennial Project and started advocating for the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs. Well, these goals aren't anti-imperialist. They're just imperialism with a smile. It's a way of subordinating global South countries to the global elite's technocratic framework. The SDGs were drafted by the same institutions that imposed structural adjustment reforms, and for the same reasons. They're managed through corporate partnerships and through foundations, private foundations, many of which have private stakes in extracting wealth from the global South, whether through mineral contracts or data harvesting or greenwashing. Okay, so he opposes military interventions now, not because he opposes violence, but because the OCGFC, the national OCGFC, now prefer to use soft power. He's in favor of investment as invasion rather than armed occupation. Jeffrey Sachs didn't switch sides. The side that he's on simply evolved in its approach. So now Jeffrey Sachs, now he's a regular speaker at BRICS events. He praises China. He decries NATO. He speaks the language of multipolarity. But this support is not solidarity and it's not sincerity. It's opportunistic harmonization with the shifting centers of elite power. That's all it is.